I'm Steve Reeder, and we're here today with Mike Marsh, and this is another filming of Monrovia Moments. So Mike, what year did you graduate from Monrovia?
I graduated in 1967.
And you attended the elementary that was built here all the way through, and then you ended up going to the old school where the bank's at in 7th grade, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you've got some really, really good stories here. So explain to me what some of your recesses were like.
Well, in the recesses over here, we went outside, and over there where the library is now, Bonnie McCracken lived, which was Branch McCracken's brother.
Sure.
And his wife was like all the old women back there, and she made cookies. And if you knew her at recess, she'd come out with cookies, and you'd go over and get a fresh cookie and everything. And it was just one of them things that was really neat. I mean, the other kids would look at you, well, how come you got a cookie? And I didn't. But I've known them all her life, and then, well, I went and visited with them up till she passed away and talked to her and all.
So they built that new elementary in the late 50s, but the one thing that you had talked about was that eventually when they added on, like in 60, they had the multipurpose room, but there were some high school classes.
We had a few classes. I had one or two that we came over here, and when it came time to come over here, you just walked over here,
right,
and went to class, and then went back when the class was over with and everything.
And the other thing that's so kind of interesting about that was you would walk across for those classes, but also the cafeteria was in the elementary.
The cafeteria was in the front of the building. As soon as you walk in on the left,
sure,
was the cafeteria. And of course, back then the cafeteria was run by a lot of the older women in the community, and I knew a lot of them, so I always came down here and ate. You were allowed to go uptown and
right,
eat if you wanted to, but I would come down here because a lot of times I knew who was in there. Well, I got kind of second helpings along with my first and
well,
everything.
wasn't one of them Bill's mom?
Yeah.
Yeah. So now, okay, the elementary, was the main entrance kind of in the middle of the building at one point?
It's basically about like what it is now.
Sure.
You walked in and you walked down the hallway.
Okay,
and
all right.
There was the classes.
Okay, and the cafeteria was there for the whole...
The cafeteria was there for the grade school and the high school.
And was lunch a little bit longer there because it was allowed to go downtown?
Yeah, I can't remember how long we had lunch period, but you had a little longer because, I mean, there wasn't that many places to eat,
right,
and, a lot of them would go uptown, which, I mean, how they kept from getting lost coming back,
right,
it was amazing because, I mean, they just,
well, it seems
lunchtime you just went uptown if you wanted to eat uptown.
So there was recess outside where you got cookies, so you got second helpings of lunch, but you'd come over here for classes, over here for cafeteria, but you also said gym class was where?
The gym class is uptown at the old gym, which is the parking lot up there now, and you walked uptown.
Right.
To gym, and when it was over with, you change clothes and you come back to the school.
So that's where the basketball games are at. But when you were in school, where was the baseball diamond and the track?
Baseball diamond and the track was basically out where the training field is, practice field for the football.
Okay.
We didn't have much of a track because back then they didn't have the resources,
sure,
but you'd run around through town and everything for cross country,
really?
and
Okay,
this and that. And
so originally the track and baseball diamond was on that side of the road.
Yeah.
And eventually they moved it over here.
Yeah.
Okay, so the gym, you played you were on the last team.
I was the last class to get to play in the old gym.
So what was it like playing in the old gym?
It was neat. I mean, you'd go to some of these schools that really had fancy gyms and everything, but it was still the nostalgia there that you had.
Right, yeah.
You was playing in an old gym.
Yeah. Branch played there.
That's
Oscar
right.
Robinson
The people.
played there.
And years ago, the American Legion used to have wrestlers that come down.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Dick the Bruiser and
really?
Cowboy Bob and
then
they all, and the funny thing was you always thought, well, they were beating the crap out of each other there, but then you'd stand outside waiting on them to come out. Well, they'd all get in the same vehicle and go home. And you'd think, well, what in the world's going on? But yeah, they had, the gym was the main purpose of of the whole town. I mean,
Well, it was
that's
a
where
community,
everything
yeah.
it was a community affair.
So the Legion was there, but the one thing that also that a lot of people have been talking about recently is the fall carnival.
Yeah.
So give me a rundown on that.
Fall Carnival, they would have games out on the floor that you played, and they had a queen, and the queen was, the way the queen got picked was by penny a vote.
Sure.
And everything, and I mean, it was a big deal. She was up on the stage,
Right.
and,
'Cause
and
there was a
everything.
stage there.
There was a stage there at the end. Just as soon as you walked in, it was actually the back part of the stage was there.
Sure.
And,
And so I think so. It was the community center. There was the fall carnival there, but that also was where graduation was at for the
That's
longest
where the
time.
class, until our class did not
Right.
graduate in the old gym.
And before this was built, the school plays were out there.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the thing.
It was the thing. Every class, I can remember when, I forget what class it was I was in, that we had a cowboy theme. And
Okay.
we had our little old guns on and everything else up on the stage of singing and everything.
Now so there were also like buildings or offices or rooms in the front, and those had been other businesses. But you had said that one year.
Our junior year, when you walked in on the right, we had a haunted house there,
Okay.
and we had
And
that was during the festival.
You've also got another really great story, and Steve Hampton had said the same thing, where at one point the barbershop was attached to the
Yeah.
old gym there, and Steve had always said that like when there weren't anybody's hair to cut, he would go in there and shoot hoops, and magically you would somehow show up. So how were you getting in the gym?
On the back part, on the gym, when you went west, Kenworthy's had a storage building.
Okay.
And on the back of it, there was a lean-to shed. Well, you could climb up on top of that shed, and the windows back then didn't lock. So you just opened the window up, you crawled in on the bleachers, and you went down and opened the door up and let everybody in. And we would be playing ball, and here come Carl Stater, which he was the janitor. And Carl was a little guy, but he'd be covered with soot and everything else. And he'd chase us around the gym floor, and eventually give up, and he'd let us go ahead and play. But we could play for a long while in there before he heard us, and then here he'd come.
So now the downtown area. So kind of starting there with 42 and 39. What was on the corner there?
Okay, you had a Marathon filling station
Sure.
there, which the Marleys
Sure.
owned.
Okay.
And the funny thing on that, back after I graduated, Carlisle used to have the ambulance.
Okay.
And a lot of times they called and said that Clyde had died. And here come
Oh. So
the
this is
Undertaker.
prank.
The Undertaker, and they finally wised up on it. But anyway, that was there. And then you going west, and there was a little bitty old sandwich shop.
Sure. Okay.
I mean, it wasn't very big at all. And then the next one was another filling station where Nancy is today. That was Jerry Wayne Piper's Dawson's
Sure.
filling station, pure oil station. Then you went across the street there where the gazebo is for the phone company. There used to be an old building there. On the back side of that old building was the telephone operator.
Okay.
You could walk around in the summertime and hear her, and she'd always have the door open because she didn't have air conditioning.
Right.
You could see her talking and plugging in on that, and then you went on up and the little shop, they called it the ice cream shop.
Right.
We call it. I can't remember too much what was in there then. Then you went on right on the crossroads of town where the barber shop is now, and that was a restaurant.
And you said it's mostly known as Fincham's, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
because Fincham said they lived upstairs.
Okay.
Banny was a teacher here at Monrovia,
Sure.
and but his wife run the restaurant. And when you walked in the door of it, there was a pinball machine,
Okay.
all right, in the front of it and everything. And then you go across the street, still going west, was the bank, and then you come into what is the vacant alley right through there. Now that Shorts was the last hardware in there, but Turley's was the one
Right.
when I grew up.
And Turley's was there.
They were there
Long
for
time.
a long time, yeah.
Right.
Hmm. And then you had the post office, then you had Kenworthy and Son, and then of course in the vacant lot you had the gym, and then on the other side of the gym used to be a storage building for Kenworthy and Son, and of course that's where we climbed up on
Right.
the back side of that to get in the gym. And then right on the corner was the blacksmith shop.
And so like Donnis Miller, Kenworthy, Turley's, they were in business for years.
Yeah.
And like Donis Miller also made the first fire truck or something.
Yeah,
I mean, those
he was
people were
instrumental
here.
in getting the fire department. I can remember being a little boy and I had a pedal tractor, and I'd always knock the front end out from underneath it. Well, my dad would have to take it up.
Right.
Dawson would have, or Donis would fix it for me and everything.
And Oldman said that Donis got him out of trouble a couple of times.
Oh,
too,
yeah,
with
Donis
stuff.
was, and the old man that worked for him, Uncle Shields, always had one of them. We always called him a coon dog, but that dog always went uptown with him whenever he'd go to work. And he lived across the street from the Pure Oil station.
Sure, okay.
There in back where Pfeiffer's was. And then you go across the street, of course, where the vacant parking lot is now was the church, and then you had another building next to it that really wasn't much that I can remember in there other than when the bank had to use it that one time and all. And then you had where Main Street is. Dowden's was the ones that I remember first, and then Byron's were in there. And I can remember on when Dowden's had it, when the tomato pickers come in. Of course, they were all Mexicans.
Right.
Well, she'd run up and lock the door. She didn't. She was afraid they was going to steal something, so she wouldn't. She'd lock the door and wouldn't let them in.
And the tomato industry was really big. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that there were acres.
All that
of
big
tomatoes.
That field out there. That's it's a big field now. You go by there and there'd be tomatoes.
Right.
And then our bus, I rode O.J. Terrell's bus. We come by there in the fall, and you'd see them little Mexican kids out there playing because they had huts for them to live in, and everything, and all. But yeah, there was a lot of tomatoes back then.
Bray's Peach Bray was on the corner, but sometime in the '60s that closed. Correct?
They had I can't remember what happened, whether Peach passed away or what, but they had a sale and sold everything in that building. And down in the basement, he used to fix screens and glass and everything else. You walk down an old dark, you've seen it on TV where you're going down into like a dungeon, and that's where all that stuff was stored. And then up along the walls, if you wanted anything when you went in there, you'd ask Peach where's that, because I mean you had them walls just covered with drawers, and he could go right to that drawer and
find it,
and pull out what you needed and everything.
Now that next building where there's the bakery and doghouse, that has always just been really hard historically because there's been so many different buildings there. And at one point on the corner there, you had Harvey's Pharmacy, but you had a restaurant there.
When I was in school, McLeod's was in the next building. Well, there was two buildings there at the time.
Yes.
They were in the next part of it, and they ended up buying
the whole thing,
or leasing or something the whole building, and that was all McLeod's General Store. And then the back is where she made the sandwiches if you went uptown to get sandwiches.
I always remember it being McLeod's, but with there being technically two offices or buildings there, it's really been a lot of movement on that.
It has, because you walk through the door from one to the other, right in the middle of the building.
Yes. Well, and then like the McLeod's, they ended up, when they were there years finally, they were finally the stable business in that area. And then after that was the barbershop?
And after that was the barbershop.
Sure. Okay. Now, the one thing that is going to be really a big part of today is the 4-H. So the first local 4-H fair was like in 1958. Why did the local 4-H fair even start here?
Back then, before it started here, they had a joint agreement with Mooresville. And one year it would be here, the next year it would be over at Mooresville. It alternated year to year. And Monrovia, Monrovia was the largest club in the county. It got to the place that we was taking all the ribbons, winning everything over there. Well, Mooresville got upset with it. So Mr. Wagner moved it over here, and we had Hubbard's Mill and, and the filling stations, and everybody, the community chipped in, and I mean, really donated a lot, and it was a 2-day fair.
Yeah, you just hear about in the 50s and 60s, it was massive. Well, the newspaper clippings, like 1,400 people were here. Yeah. And it was that field, but they also used the school for some of the crafts, correct?
Yeah.
And then, so you had the local fair, but in the yearbooks in the 50s and 60s, there's a 4-H photo, and then there's other like local groups, like there were the Wilbur Shamrocks,
Yeah.
the Gasburgers, the Hall Bluebirds. I mean, it was that big of a deal that you had local 4-H groups that all competed. Okay, what were the junior leaders?
Junior Leaders was a county-wide organization that if your last 4 years that you was in, you could join. And it was just a bunch of older youths from all over the county. And we did different things. I mean, during the fair, the last day of the fair, when they cleaned out where we had all the indoor exhibits, we used to have a dance there after while the fair was going on, or it was the end of the fair. But anyway, then that involved into different things, and you could win awards to go on trips and everything. And I was fortunate I got to go what they called to the 4-H council, state council, which was up at Lafayette, and you spent 3 or 4 days up there. Well, I was fortunate that I got to go to it and everything, and it was just a county organization.
Right. And then the other thing that shows up in a lot of those yearbooks is the ribbon winners. What's that?
The ribbon winners was the name of the Monrovia 4-H club.
Okay.
That was what it was, and when we had all our 4-H meetings up in the old gym.
Sure.
And Mr. Wagner was the 4-H leader, and it was really neat in the summertime because I don't know where he got it from, but he'd always have those big buckets of ice cream. I mean, it was all one time.
Right.
But anyway, you ate ice cream after the 4-H meeting. And then in the summertime, right before the fair, we would take a tour around to the 4-H members. And then we ended up at Echo Lake swimming and have a pitch-in dinner up there. And that was kind of the highlight right before the fair.
Now, your sister was heavily involved in a lot in school,
yes,
but in 4-H as well, and she was port queen. Explain this.
The port queens, you had to get elected into it. You had to go to one of the breed organizations like Yorkshires or Durocs or what. She was the York queen, and she won. She had to go up to Lafayette to win that. And then she went up to State Fair and won the State Fair. So that was a combination of all the breeds having a queen. And then around Thanksgiving time, they would go, I believe it was up to Chicago, and run for the national port queen.
And so each breed had a queen, and so she won over
all the breeds
for the state.
Yeah.
And it seems as if from the research, she's the first one from the school.
I think she was the first one, and then Linda Kaiser or Shields was one, and then Glenda Mills, which she graduated with me also.
So it's like Monrovia just really kind of not only did well locally, but they were doing well at the state level too.
Yeah.
So now you had a really important accomplishment with showing as well. What was that?
We have, well, it was this book that I brought along, but anyway, you had to keep all your records and everything, and you put all your accomplishments in it, and then it went into the state, and if you won the state, then it was sent into the national. And I was fortunate enough, it'd be my freshman year at Purdue's when I got the award, but Mormon's Feed Company give out 4 $500 scholarships. And I was fortunate to be one of the
so
4.
You were one of the 4 national.
I was one of the 4 national.
And you told a really interesting story. You were in Chicago in November.
We was in Chicago in November, and of course you had kids from all over the United States. Well, there were kids there even from Hawaii. They had never seen it snow, and it started snowing. And you'd have thought that them kids that you give them a bucket of candy, because I mean, they didn't bring warm clothing in the first place because they didn't know what they was coming into, but that didn't bother them. They got to see snow.
Now, the other thing that we've really been trying to find more information on is Monrovia's FFA program. And the one thing that you had helped us with was getting Monrovia's original charter.
Yeah.
And Monrovia is a very unique thing that they had the 4th FFA program in the state in 1929.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just absolutely insane how early they were on this. But the history on this is pretty spotty because there's no yearbooks for a pretty long stretch of time, and the FFA program isn't in some of the other yearbooks. So who was Wagner did 4-H and FFA?
Yes, sir. He was both, and something that we had talked about earlier, if you were an 8th grader coming in your freshman year, they always went on a field trip in the spring.
Okay.
Somewhere. Well, we went to Curtis Candy Farms, which you'd think Curtis Candy Farm was a candy store. Well, it's not. Back then is when they first started getting into artificial breeding of cattle. And we went out there to it, got to go out to it, and then we got to go down to the St. Louis River on the paddle boat that evening and everything. But that was one thing that you always look forward to it. And but his class was in the old building. If he was facing it from the road, was on the right-hand side.
Okay. And there were like the local chapters, so there were officers, but you were a district.
I was a local officer, and then you could run for district, which they always had a convention in July up at Purdue.
Sure. That
you'd go up to, and you went against everybody in your district. And I was fortunate that I was secretary and vice president and then president my last year.
And you think that there may have been some Monrovia kids?
There might have been maybe one or two before then, but whenever you were president of your district, your advisor was then the advisor for the district.
Okay. Now, you've always been heavily involved in school and then just the community, and you've been township trustee since 1974.
Yeah.
Which you speculate you probably are the longest serving township trustee in Indiana history, right?
Yeah. It was after my first term, and it used to, you could only serve 2 terms and then you had to set out a term. Well, right at close to the end of my first term, they took away that, and it was unlimited.
Sure.
And I've been very fortunate that the people of Monrovia has put enough trust in me that I have been the trustee.
And so this will be like our last question here, but you have just really been heavily involved with local history, and you've worked really well with the Alumni Association and then the local library. There's just been a lot that you and the township and your advisors have done. So what have been some of the projects that you've done for the local cemeteries?
We just yesterday, the West Union Cemetery, there's 30 Civil War vets buried out there. And they put the stone up yesterday for it. The first stone that we put up is the Methodist Cemetery, which is in the back part of Latta Addition, which was the first addition in Monrovia. There were 5 Civil War vets there. And the other one is the Bethesda Cemetery, which is out past where Mike Patrick lives, back in there. And we haven't got it done yet. The stone is made, but there was 5 Civil War vets there.
Sure. So the cemeteries, 2 of those are township cemeteries under your purview.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is the local historical markers, which ironically your son got a Indiana historical marker as his class project, which your son was a valedictorian. He was a Lilly Endowment recipient, ISPA shooting star, top 20 senior of the state, probably the youngest Hoosier to ever file for and get a marker. And then you've worked with the Alumni Association on getting other markers. So what are some of the markers that the township has gotten?
The township, the first one we started out with, and this has all been with the cooperation of the history department here at the school. I mean, they have been tremendous on it because they have done the research for it.
Sure.
And but the first one we done was the West Union Church, which was an underground railroad at one time.
Yeah.
And then we've got Hubbard Mill, which unfortunately the building's not there, but one of the boys' wife had got a picture painted, and we've got that picture on there, and that just blew that one away whenever we done it, because I like to tell everybody to get out and look at it, because there's a rabbit in the grass.
Sure, yeah.
And they look at you and say, what are you talking about? You know, but I mean, that picture just blew the whole thing away on it. I mean, it just was ironic. It was really something.
Well, that mill was just such, I mean, there's the old gym, but then there's the Hubbard Mill.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just, but I think also you've done not only an unreal job of getting the markers done, but getting the word out. Like, there may have been 50 people at the Hubbard Mill in Valen.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just really a great moment on that.
Well, that was really the one of the, not being downtown, but being one of the big vocal points of the whole community, because you had the farmers coming in there and everything, and old Doc Bradley was more or less the secretary and run it for Jim. he loved to get people mad at each other, and then just sit back and laugh about it. And you'd be in there, and you knew when somebody coming in, who was going to get it. And boy, he'd lay into them, and you'd think, well, there's going to be a fight going on before this is over with. But it wasn't. But I mean, it was really a focal point of the community.
And then the next one was for the schools.
The next was for the school, which that was a big thing for me, because my class being the last class to graduate from there and everything. And then we went from the school, we went out to Gasburg, which a lot of people didn't know it used to be a school.
Right, yeah.
And we've got that one, and then this past year we finally got the one uptown for the old gym, and was very fortunate on it that Branch McCracken's 3 granddaughters come down for the unveiling.
Yes, they have been just outstanding on everything. Yeah. It just has been. So all those have been done, and it just seems like the crowd just gets bigger and all that. Yeah. There are some in the works.
We have 2 left that we're working on. One of them is the old Smith School, which a lot of people don't even realize there was a school there. It's out off the Hall Road out where I live, and right there on the corner where Billy Mack Fisher used to live. There used to be a school there, and we were very fortunate. And the school has got it. We've got the old handbell that was there. I fortunately, one of the old guys that I knew for years, his mom had it.
Sure, yeah.
And after we started putting these up, he seen me one day at the state fair and said he had a bunch of stuff he wanted to give us. And he said, I've got the old bell for the old Smith School. And he come down, and fortunately, the school got it because Don Mike passed away this past year and everything. And then we've got where James Wiccan Riley had given his speech, supposedly his first speech in a blacksmith shop, which I didn't know there was even a blacksmith shop there till we done some research, and it was back behind the festival building, which we've got permission from the festival building to put the sign out there because there's no place else to put it. But those are the other 2 that we have in the works.
And then we have signs for the entries.
We've got 4 signs that are ordered that are the same model as the one that's out at Gasburg. The one at Gasburg is a little smaller sign because there wasn't as much verbiage. And we went and put the town's logo on it.
Yep.
And they are ordered, and hopefully we can get them put up this year. And there'll be one on every state road coming into town at Monrovia's boundaries.
Well, Mike, we'd like to really thank you for taking time for the interview, and this was Monrovia Moments with Mr. Reeder and Mike Marsh, and it was filmed by Taylor Turner.